Across Africa, we often hear about aid. We hear about donor funding. We hear about international intervention. But today, we are looking at something different. On February 11, Rimtalba Jean Emmanuel Ouédraogo, who is the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, handed over 64 heavy-duty trucks fully financed by the national budget to strengthen the country's emergency response system. This is over 5 billion CFA franc, the country's national currency. At the moment, no donor branding, no external financing, state funded. The question is, what does this mean for Africa? Now, let me share a video of the Prime Minister handing over that truck to you, to the ministry that is responsible for this. Now, the video. Okay, now these are a bit of a detailed facts about this. The vehicles were handed to the Ministry of Family and Solidarity and will serve the National Council for Emergency Relief and Rehabilitation. That's the institution it's handed over to. Here is what the fleet includes: 38 of them 40-ton cargo trucks, 10 dump trucks, 10 10-ton trucks, 2 tanker trucks, 2 crane recovery trucks, 2 low loader flatbed trucks. This is not symbolic. These trucks are built for transporting humanitarian aid, supporting internally displaced population, responding to floods and natural disasters, infrastructure recovery, heavy logistics in remote or insecure zones. In simple terms, this is crisis capacity. Now,
4 trucks, and this is the first batch, because the ambition is to acquire more logistical resources for the National Council for Rescue, Emergency and Rehabilitation. And the goal, as you know, is to make this count. This morning, we handed over a batch of equipment, and in particular, logistical resources, on behalf of Comrade President Faso. As you have seen, these are 64 trucks of various sizes and categories. And this batch of logistical resources was acquired entirely from the state budget, with an effort of nearly 5.5 billion for its acquisition. Obviously, this is a historic event because it should be remembered that the National Council for Rescue, Emergency and Rehabilitation has never had a fleet of more than 10 trucks, and today, in one go, we are handing over a batch of 64 trucks. And this is the first batch, because the ambition is to acquire more logistical resources for the National Council for Rescue, Emergency and Rehabilitation. And the goal, as you know, is to make this council autonomous, because currently most of the supply convoys that you see are convoys that are organized by the National Council for Emergency Relief and Rehabilitation. And most of the time, due to a lack of logistical resources, the council is forced to resort to service providers, which is not easy, which slows down the council's responsiveness and compromises the effectiveness of operations. Fix the TNT. Thus, the goal is to equip this council with the capacity to operationalize support and resupply actions for populations in need whenever necessary. And
okay, now let's stop it here and let's look at this from the national context. I will also look at it from the Pan-African context. What does this mean for Africa? Okay, now in terms of national context, Burkina Faso has faced serious challenges in recent years, as you all know. Now there's armed security in parts of the country, large-scale internal displacement, climate-related disasters, infrastructure strain. Now, in many African countries, emergency logistics depend heavily on international NGOs, UN agencies, foreign military transport, external humanitarian corridors. Now, when state cannot move food, medicine, and shelter quickly, sovereignty becomes fragile. By investing directly in logistics, Burkina Faso is strengthening something fundamental here: the ability of the state to respond to its own people and to its own need, and that matters. Let's look at this now from the Pan-African perspective. Let's step back, all right? For decades, Africa's emergency response systems have often been externally supported, sometimes necessary, but rarely self-financed at scale. This move signals three major continental themes. Number one, domestic resource mobilization. The 5 billion CFA franc came from the national budget, from the patriotic support fund, in a time when many African states struggle with debt pressure and IMF restructuring programs. Allocating this amount to emergency infrastructure sends a message: the state is prioritizing resilience. This is governance through budgeting. Number two, sovereignty in practice. Pan-Africanism is not only about speech, right? It's about capacity. True sovereignty means you can secure your borders, you can feed your displaced populations, you can respond to floods without waiting for approval from abroad. Logistic is power, and Africa's future will depend heavily on which states build logistical independence. Number three, a continental trend. Across the Sahel and parts of West Africa, governments are increasingly speaking about strategic autonomy, reduced foreign dependency, rebuilding state institutions. If properly managed, investments like this could represent a shift toward African crisis management led by African institutions, right? But sustainability will be a key. Now let's balance our analysis, okay? Now, a Pan-African perspective also requires critical thinking, right? Not just only activism or propaganda. Important questions still remain to be: number one, is there a long-term maintenance budget for these trucks? Are drivers and operations fully trained? Is fuel supply secured? Is the institution that these trucks are handed to institutionally strengthened alongside this fleet? Hardware without institutional discipline does not produce resilience. But if governance structures match the investment, right, this could become a meaningful step toward state consolidation. Let's broaden this implication now for Africa. Climate change is increasing flood risks, drought displacement, food insecurity. Security volatility is reshaping parts of the continent. In this context, logistics infrastructure becomes strategic, not optional. Africa's future resilience may depend less on emergency appeals and more in pre-position capacity. Burkina Faso's move suggests one model: build from within, finance internally, strengthen institutions gradually. In conclusion, this story is not about trucks, it's about direction. It's about whether African states can gradually shift from externally managed crisis response to internally financed resilience. If sustained, investments like this could represent something deeper, a quiet but meaningful evolution in Africa's state capacity, and perhaps a practical expression of Pan-African sovereignty. Now, if Africa is to shape its own future, it must be able to move resources, move aid, move quickly. In Burkina Faso, what happened this week, we saw a government investing in exactly that. Thank you very much again for tuning in, and I will see you on the next one.